the other day, Bernie Sanders was talking about the H1B program in the United States. Very problematic. The opening thumb of this video is him hitting the Senate with a sussy expression, you know, but hopefully he brings it back. Bernie, no!
Madam President, as we go forward in this new session of Congress, I would hope very much will be a serious focus on the crises facing the working families of our country.
You see a bunch of liberals on Twitter
President, we are the
canceling
wealthiest
Bernie over this?
nation on earth.
I just want to watch a bit.
We are the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. Mm-hmm. And yet today, while we have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had, 60% of our people live paycheck to paycheck. The life expectancy of working people is far below that in other wealthy countries. 85 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured. Some 800,000 Americans are homeless. 25% of seniors are trying
800,000? Jesus Christ. Did I hear that right?
Underinsured. Some 800,000 Americans are homeless.
I did, apparently.
25% of seniors are trying to survive on $15,000 a year or less. And we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major nation on earth. Further, we remain, shamefully, the only wealthy country not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right. Meanwhile, Madam President, while working families struggle to put food on the table and pay their bills, the wealthiest people in our country have never, ever had it so good. And we are now in the absurd situation, the grossly unjust situation, where the three wealthiest people on top own more wealth than the bottom half of American society.
Are we in a legit Great Depression situation again? No, but considering the fact that a massive amount of our economy is now just like speculative exchange and doesn't have anything to do with actual material production. Like if our economies were judged at their wealth based purely on the value of the physical material production within that country, we'd be getting lapped by China. So I feel like at some point we're gonna have another 2008. Somebody's going to like under evaluate to a critical extent, or someone's gonna default on a loan payment, and the amount of money will be so large that like it'll lead to a chain reaction of collapses. I don't know.
Some 170 million people.
Yeah, we're in the Gilded Age,
basically.
basically.
More wealth than 170 million on the bottom. Madam President, that is not what America is supposed to be about.
What if it's Tesla? Wouldn't that be funny?
And in truth, there are a number of reasons.
Like someone wakes up and they're like, wait, why is Tesla worth $50 bajillion even though the Cybertruck sucks and they make less cars than other companies? And then the entire economy collapses. It could happen. It could happen.
Why we are living in a nation today where the wealth of the billionaire class is exploding while the working class of our country struggles to keep their heads above water. There are many causes as to why, despite a huge increase in worker productivity, real weekly wages for the average American worker
and it
are
can
less
be
today than they
part of consequence of his PoE stream. Unironically, yeah. It literally could be like Elon crashes out because he's been faking high-level PoE 2 gameplay. He loses the faith of some higher-up like Silicon Valley VCs who are themselves big gamers who no longer trust Elon's holdings because it turns out that he was a fake gamer. They pull out. Everyone else is like, whoa, why is the price dipping? They pull out. Value plummets. It turns out that too many people had holdings in Tesla. So you have like the speculative investment equivalent of bank run where everyone's trying to sell, no one's buying. What if it all came tumbling down thanks to the Path of Exile 2 crash out, you know? Why is Voss so pressed about Elon? He is the shadow president and wealthiest man on earth. If he sneezes and farts at the same time, if I can say something about making fun of him, I will. Like, it was one thing when he was just a wealthy dipshit. Now, if he wants to be the main character of the universe, he got his wish.
They were 50 years ago. Real weekly wages less than they were 50 years ago. And why during that period there was a $50 trillion transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. Now, a lot of the reasons as to why the very rich are becoming richer and working class families are struggling has to do with disastrous trade policies, which have resulted in the loss of millions.
Elon Musk was so bad at Path of Exile 2, it was credible evidence of fraud. Oh my God, that would be funny. An investor lawsuit on the grounds that the value of Elon's companies and their holdings were in part based on competence derived from his performance in video games, and lying about the performance in those video games is detractive enough to the perceived value of those companies that it constitutes legal fraud. Hey, it's a better case for fraud than DeSantis arguing that Budweiser doing one ad with Dylan Mulvaney was like fraud because it fell below the standard of enriching the investors of Anheuser-Busch, you know? Like, that's a better case than Ron DeSantis was pointing to.
Of good-paying jobs. The failure of Congress to raise the minimum wage to a living wage is another reason.
Many women are
millions and millions of workers today
rage.
are forced to try to survive on starvation wages. And furthermore, we are seeing and have seen aggressive and often illegal union busting activities on the part of major employers. All of those reasons and more are issues that we have got to deal with. Today, I want to focus on one more reason as to why the working class of this country is struggling, and that has to do with the H1B guest worker program. Madam President, Elon Musk, the wealthiest man in the world with a net worth of nearly $430 billion, and other multi-billionaires in the high-tech industry claim that the
Oh, you're right. The video is super distinct. I was mostly looking at chat.
H1B
That's funny.
federal guest worker program is vital to our economy
Boomer
because
video.
of the scarcity of highly skilled engineers and other technology workers in the United States. In other words, what they say is they are trying desperately to find just highly skilled American workers to do their jobs, just can't find them, just not there. And in my view, Musk and the other billionaires who are strongly supporting the H-1B program are dead wrong. American workers are there, they're just not looking for them. In my view,
that's probably true. There were a lot of liberals on social media canceling Bernie for this. He's been anti-H-1B for a long time. I'm like largely anti-H-1B visa, but not for the reason right-wingers are. So, you know, it's like me looking back and forth to make sure I'm different, you know? Take issue with it, but not in the problematic way.
The main function of the H-1B program is not to hire the best and the brightest. That's the theory. We've got to bring in the best and the brightest to help our companies function and grow wealth in America. That's the theory. But in truth, the reality of what the H-1B program is to replace good-paying American jobs with hundreds of thousands of lower-paid guest workers from abroad who are often treated as indentured servants. The cheaper it is to hire guest workers, the more money the multi-billionaire owners of large corporations make. In other words, this program is not only grossly unfair to American workers, many ways unfair to foreign.
It's not hundreds of thousands, though, right? Isn't the maximum number of H-1B applicants at one time something like 85,000? Am I off on that? Or is that 85,000 per? Is that 85,000 new entrants per year or 85,000 at a cap at any given point in time? Let me see. Eligible registrations from 750. Let me see. How many issues? 120,000 benefit. How many? It's 100K new per year. That's a lot of people. A total of approximately 600,000 workers employed by 50,000 employers. Yeah, it's more than I thought. Well, good thing I was already anti H1B visa. Well, a decent number of people. By the way, what he's saying is a right-wing take within Germany. It depends on why you're saying it. Like, H1B workers are kind of like indentured servants, you know? It's not good. I don't give a shit about the whole, like, local workers are being replaced with foreign workers. That's not my dealio, okay? A person is a person. Whether they're white, brown, black, American, or foreign born, everyone's American in their heart. Why don't you care about that? Why the fuck would I care whether or not in America, the wealthiest country on earth, the person getting any specific job was born within the set of lines I was born in, or within a different set of lines? Like, a totally arbitrary distinction, you know? It's not like we're at risk of having our wealth extracted by a different country. The problem with H-1B visas is the exploitation of those workers. It's wrong because it hurts workers. Yeah, I mean, it hurts the workers that are being brought over on the condition that they continue working or they be deported. Yeah, pretty f***ed up. It hurts Americans. Americans are just as human as non-Americans.
Foreign workers as well. According to the Economic Policy Institute, between 2022 and 2023, the top 30 companies...
My friends were fired and replaced. The worth of a human is not determined by whether or not they're your friend, I'm sorry to say. That's not the... doesn't actually weigh in the calculation.
Using the H1B program, laid off 85,000 American...
We can change jobs in H1B, do some research. Yeah, no shit, you can change jobs, but do you think that doesn't add a little bit of extra added pressure? The fact that if you can't find a new job, or that if the new job isn't to your liking or requires you to move, you could potentially be, like, deported? You really not think that... Like, you really think being given a buffer window during which you can have another job or be deported doesn't change the fact that you're being pressured with deportation, that added threat? It's literally an added threat. It's exploitation.
Workers, while simultaneously bringing in over 34,000 guest workers from abroad. In 2019 and 2020, 85% of H-1B visas were awarded to entry-level and junior guest workers who are paid between 20 to 40% less than American workers in similar occupations. So, number one, it is simply not true that the H-1B program focuses on the very rare and highly skilled workers that American companies cannot find.
I understand Vosh's perspective, but he's literally putting foreign workers above the existing country. I don't know if this is your first time encountering the set of positions from me, but the moral value of a person born in America is worth exactly the same as the moral value of a person who's born in India. To me. And it should be to you. I'm sorry. I don't care. It would be a different issue if there was like a colonial element to it, with like the extraction of wealth from America. But that's not really an issue here. Like, America has the wealth. If anything, we do the opposite. We extract a lot of wealth from other countries. The real extraction of wealth is taking place from the working class to the owning class. Like, Indians being brought in to work computer science jobs, you know, I agree that they're being exploited and that it's an unfair system, you know. But the victims here, like, the extent to which a white man in America is being victimized is determined entirely by the inequitable policies of the owning class, not by the fact that an Indian guy came over to work a job or whatever. That, you know, immigrants coming in, taking our jobs, hysteria nonsense has been one of the driving legitimizations of xenophobia for basically as long as capitalism has existed, and it's always been bullshit. It's never been backed by the data. It's always just been the thing that the capitalists point to, you know? Why are you okay with depressing wages? Look at the data. It doesn't depress wages. I'm sorry. You have a bunch of like intuitive arguments against it. I'm really sorry. I've gone down these roads before. I've walked down paths you couldn't imagine. but it's a socialist channel, man. Okay, you can't believe in you can't argue workers of the world unite and then be like, okay, well, leaving aside the trillions extracted from the economy by the wealthy, I just yeah, in this system in which foreign workers are brought in and are made indentured servants, where if they get fired they could potentially be deported back to their home country, the real victims here are white men in the countries with the indentured servants. Yeah, I get it. They were saying the same damn thing about black workers who came up north after the end of the Civil War, because factory owners chose to pay those workers less than the existing white men over there. I've heard the game before. I know this one. Did the same damn thing with the Irish and the Italians too. It's not just a different color thing, though. Of course, back then they said the Irish and the Italians were different. You know, whatever. By the way, immigrants don't depress wages. The owners do. The people who pay the wages do. They always have. You can supply and demand law of economics your way through that as much as you want, but at the end of the day, like, your wages are determined by those people.
85%, to repeat, of H1B visas were awarded to entry-level and junior guest workers, and they are paid 20 to 40% less than American workers in similar occupations. And let me just give you...
Isn't it also a bit of a brain drain problem for countries like India? It can be, to be sure, though thankfully India is such a massive country that I don't think the H-1B visa program here in America takes as much from... I think it's more of a problem in countries like Nigeria, where they have a lot of really good doctors coming over here because our positions pay much better. But yeah, no, that can be an issue. Though then again, like, that would be another instance of them being victimized. Vosh literally pulling an all lives matter. That's true. The woke Black Lives Matter position of immigrants are stealing our gerbs versus the reactionary all lives matter position of all human lives are equal and your wealth is objectively being extracted by the owning class, not by H-1B visa workers. All right.
Few examples as to how unfair the H-1B program is. In Dallas, Texas, H-1B software developers are making $44,000 less than American workers doing the exact same job. This is from information from the U.S. Department of Labor. In Houston, Texas, H-1B accountants, I did not know, to be honest with you, that we had a scarcity in accountants, but be that as it may, H-1B accountants are paid nearly $40,000 less than American accountants.
Only Americans could center an issue where the capitalists in their country are exporting their jobs to, like, slave sweatshop workers in China or Bangladesh or whatever, and frame it as white men being victimized. That's the doctrine our country has been on for so long, and the brain rot that it has caused is so evident when you see people talk about this. You know what I mean? Like, literally, like, a handful of ultra-wealthy oligarchs are like, in order to make more money, we will have slaves do the work. And somehow this is the victimization of the non-slaves. Do you think maybe we could redirect our antagonism just a little bit? Like, just a smidgen? There might be another group of people causing the problem.
The exact same work. In Santa Barbara, California, H-1B workers who are hired as computer system engineers make just $45,000 a year. Does that sound like the kind of salary that would bring forth some extremely highly skilled people for jobs that American workers cannot fill? Madam President, you tell me, why would a corporation hire an American computer systems engineer at a salary of $110,000 a year when it is $65,000 cheaper to hire an H-1B worker for that same exact position? That's basically what this whole debate is about, and that is that large corporations are paying foreign workers substantially lower salaries than they are paying American workers. Madam President, if you want to know why multi-billionaire owners of high-tech companies love the H-1B program so much, that is the reason why. They are using this program to substantially undercut the wages of American workers. Moreover, Madam President, there are estimates that as many as 33% of all new information technology jobs in America.
So this is what I mean about depressing wages. Okay. People who think H1B workers are depressing wages will then have to answer why a new person being born and entering the field does not also depress wages in the same way. The answer to that is because the thing that is lowering the wages is not actually the addition of one new worker. More people doesn't mean fewer jobs for all those people. Because the more people there are in a country, the more services and goods need to be produced to meet the needs of those people. And we ship services and goods internationally now, so you're not even limited to the population of your own country. The idea that increasing the population of a country means more people have to be unemployed is obviously nonsense. Why then have wages not decreased massively per capita relative to like the increase in productivity because of the increasing number of people in this country? 100 years ago, we had, hundreds of millions of fewer jobs than we do today. Where are those jobs coming from? Well, as you have more people in the country, you have more jobs too. Why then is this depreciative effect on wages present with H1B workers, but not if just a new guy gets born and enters the field? Because the capitalists can convince you that it's justified to pay the H1B worker less. That's it. That's it. Exact same thing they do with illegal immigrants. Why do illegal immigrants depress wages? Even though they don't, by the way, except for people who haven't gotten a high school degree. They don't for the rest of society. But why then? They're just other workers. Would wages be decreased if more people join the field? It is literally just the guys on top finding social or cultural excuses to get away with robbing the people beneath them. That's literally it. So don't fall back on the like econ. Supply demand argues it. You must lower wages with more workers. No, you don't, because supply of workers may go up as more people enter the workforce, but the overall demand for goods and services increases with the population increasing as well. Why does this effect only seem to happen with immigrants, not with the population just increasing in general? Why is one of them expansion and the other one undercutting? It's because what they can get away with. Nobody would be convinced if a capitalist factory owner said, we have to cut wages because now more people live in our country. We've expanded and have more workers, so now wages have to be lower. What? No? No, you don't. What the f are you talking about? But if they're like, oh, sorry, guys, this new wave of immigrants has lowered wages. You lowered the wages. You chose to. It wasn't the economic force that did it. You thought you could get away with it. The economic force in question is the social allowance for you to reduce what you pay people. No, the corporation bringing in that worker directly did it. Is that bait? Like, do you think that a corporation going from 200 employees to 201 makes like like naturally, like as a law of physics, causes the wage of all the workers to drop? What are you talking about? It's people who like haven't even read an Econ 101 textbook, but have heard smarmy Twitter threads from liberals epically debunking lefty arguments who don't understand shit. No, actually, a boom in workforce participation in the factories didn't depreciate wages back in like 1882, but after black people moved north, those did depreciate wages for some inexplicable reason. For some reason, new workforce participation from the domestic population doesn't decrease wages, but new workforce participation from a foreign population or a different race or ethnicity of people does decrease. I've heard it all before. I've heard it all before. Yeah, Vosh, I totally disagree with you on this. That's fine. If you're like a cuck who's throated billionaire cock and you want to believe their excuses, go for it. If you look back through the history books, you can find literally thousands of examples of business owners coming up with excellent excuses about how their exploitation of foreign workers means they now have like a reason to reduce wages for people. It's always bullshit. It has been every time. The wealth exists. The money is there. It's just up there. They took it. When they hire someone and pay them less because they're foreigners, the money that they aren't paying them goes somewhere. It goes there. Theoretically, they could pay you jack shit. They could pay all of you nothing. This money is going somewhere. The only reason they can get away with paying those people less is because it's considered socially permissible. All right, we got to continue.
Are being filled by guest workers. And according to the Census Bureau data, there are millions of Americans with advanced degrees in science, technology, engineering, and math who are not currently employed in those professions. In other words, we tell kids, go out, get involved in STEM work,
Sorry about the
become a
desync.
scientist, become an engineer, become a mathematician, whatever. And then we bring in people from abroad.
Bosch stopped denying the facts of economics. Again, bargaining power is integrated into real wage demand supply laws. Yeah, so why is it that foreigners have less bargaining power than domestic workers? Because of socially permissible biases. You're literally arguing my point. The bargaining power, you're describing the force that I'm referring to. They have less bargaining power because they're foreign, because they're black, because they don't speak English, because they're illegal, because their bargaining power is the force I'm talking about that allows the people on top to exploit them. So fight for them to have better bargaining power.
To fill the jobs that they were educated to do. Adding insult to injury, half of the top 30 H1B employers are companies whose major function in life is to outsource jobs, known in the industry as body shops. In other words, the same companies that are involved with supplying American companies with cheap foreign labor at home are the same exact companies that provide even cheaper labor to corporations when they move abroad. They are two sides of the same coin. Madam President, if there is truly a major shortage of skilled tech workers in this country, as Elon Musk and others have argued, why did Tesla lay off over 7,500 American workers last year, including many software developers and engineers at its factory in Austin, Texas, while at the same time applying to hire thousands of H-1B guest workers? If these jobs are only going to the best and the brightest, why has Tesla employed H-1B guest workers as associate accountants for as little as $58,000 a year, associate mechanical engineers for as little as $70,000 a year, and associate material planners for as little as $80,000 a year? Now, Madam President, I will admit I am not a rocket scientist, but to my mind, those occupations don't sound like highly specialized jobs that are primarily for the top 1/10 of 1%, as Mr. Musk claimed last month. Madam President, if this program is really supposed to be about importing workers with highly advanced degrees.
Just know you hold the exact same position as alt-righters on this. Well, my position is that H-1B holders shouldn't be deported if they don't hold the job. They should just be brought in as immigrants and get their green cards immediately. So my position is to increase immigration into the United States and not have people thrown out if they don't hold the jobs they hold. So probably not the exact same as positions that the far right have, I imagine. My position that they should be given the same rights as American citizens, that's the far right. Use your damn heads. Use your f***ing heads, man. Come on. It's a slight difference. Yeah, I'm fighting for them to be paid the same. Well, fighting, you know, I'm on a YouTube live stream right now. Arguing for them to be paid the same. That'd be nice. If they were given the same rights, I mean.
Degrees in science and technology, why are H-1B guest workers being employed as fashion models, lawyers, dog trainers, massage therapists, cooks, and English teachers? One might think that in the United States of America, we could find English teachers and not need to bring in people from abroad. And further, does anyone really believe that in America we do not have enough lawyers and need to bring in more attorneys from abroad? Madam President, at a time of massive income and wealth inequality, we need fundamental changes in our economic policies. We need an economy that works for all, not just the few. And one small but very important way forward in that direction is to bring about major reforms to the H-1B program in order to benefit American workers. And that is why I have filed an amendment to the Lake and Riley bill that we are debating this week that will do just that. And I hope very much that the leaders agree on allowing that amendment to be debated and voted upon. And let me very briefly describe what this amendment does in terms of reforming the H1B program. First, this amendment would double the major H1B fee that corporations pay before they can...
Bosch, is it because the CEOs use these workers because they know they weren't from a union and or protest, no resistance? I think that's the main reason, yeah. I think that actually paying them less is secondary. There are plenty of H1B workers that are basically paid at par with their native coworker or domestic coworkers. But the H1B worker will put up with way more bullshit and work twice as hard because they have the threat of deportation hanging over them. That's what happened after Elon took over Twitter. Basically, everyone on Twitter quit except for the H1B workers, which is one of the reasons Elon loves H1B visas, because all the people who could just get other jobs or could just like coast for a while or whatever, they left that shithole. But the people who were desperate to stay because they didn't really have another choice, they stuck around. They're easier to exploit. It's the exact same as like undocumented workers, right? The main benefit to an agricultural facility hiring undocumented workers like Mexicans down in the, in the South isn't just paying them less. It's also you can exploit the fuck out of them and they can't go to the police. They can't unionize because they can't exist as a legal entity because they're an undocumented immigrant. They can't protest a lack of overtime pay. They can't complain about OSHA, workplace safety, or anything like that, They're very, 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 very vulnerable to exploitation. H-1B workers are basically just the nicer version of that. It's just another way of using a person's immigration status to hold a sort of Damocles over their head, basically, and deny them the same rights as others. Yes, H-1B workers also won't whistleblow, because, again, threatens their place in the work. Neither will undocumented workers. They're foreign scabs. No. A scab is somebody who is hired to break a strike. The H-1B workers in question that we're referring to are just the exploited workers who stick around after because they're more desperate. Scabs have a choice, and also they're the ones taking advantage of a gap in labor as a consequence of a strike. It's not the same thing. YouTube chat when you have to sympathize with non-white proles. At least it gives us something to talk about. Yeah, I used to mock Tucker Carlson for opposing H-1B. Yes, because Tucker Carlson's reason for disliking H-1B is that it lets brown people in and that white people are the victims. Oh my God, T.I., you're the same person. Here, you've had enough, okay? It hasn't been a one guy, but it's been close, and that's been one of the most one guys. Bosch debating YouTube Nosballs, we've reverted back to the ancient times. It makes me feel nostalgic, yeah. Excuse me. Not fascists, though, just like ignorant liberals, I guess.
Hire guest workers from abroad. This provision would generate over $370 million in revenue each year. And what would we use that revenue for? Well, it would be used to provide nearly 20,000 scholarships each and every year for American students pursuing advanced degrees in science, technology, engineering, math, and other fields vital to the competitiveness of our nation. If the members of this body truly believe we need H1...
Another reason you want these jobs just being filled by domestic workers or real immigrants, people on green cards, not people on H-1B visa programs, is that after these H-1B visa workers lose their jobs, they just go back to their home countries, and we lose the benefit of having these skilled workers here in the country. Like, one of the benefits of attracting top talent, theoretically, from other countries is that you are now enriching your country with the presence of these extremely skilled individuals. I know not all H-1B visa program holders, are coming over super, super skilled or whatever, but like, that's the idea. So the problem is like, they're only coming over to enrich one company and then they're back unless they go for a full green card, and that, often that gets held over their head in a very exploitative sense. Yeah, whatever training or knowledge they gained in America was only applied to that one corporation, and then it just goes. It's like stupid, man. Hollowing yourself out. Yeah, basically.
H-1B visas in order to compensate for a shortage of skilled American professionals.
Let them stay.
This amendment
Let them
will
stay. Let them
attract
pay
tens of
taxes as a
thousands of
citizen, or
America's
a
best
resident.
and brightest young people into those fields. Second, this amendment requires corporations to substantially increase wages for the jobs they need before they would be allowed to hire H1B guest workers. Specifically, this amendment would raise the prevailing wage for the H1B program to at least the median local wage. In other words, if the H1B program is truly meant for the best and the brightest, it should not be used as a tool to undercut the wages of highly skilled American workers, and that is what this amendment would prevent. Third, this amendment would prohibit corporations from replacing laid-off American workers with H1B guest workers from overseas. Corporations that are engaged in mass layoffs should not be
not to be the YouTuber who's too woke, but it is important to remember that all of this is getting around. It's like band-aiding the underlying problem, you know? The underlying problem here remains like the way the profit motive is allowed to determine the lives and future of everyone in this country. Like the extent to which it has been allowed to run rampant, how the profit-seeking of publicly owned corporations has been put above literally everything else, the stripping of wealth from society, all of this is like band-aiding around the underlying issue. And the underlying issue is that we're fighting an uphill battle. We're swimming upstream against a long and very powerful series of incentives from the most powerful people on earth that make your life worse. Like, the most powerful people on earth are incentivized by this system to make your life worse. And the only thing coming in between them and doing that, and they have done that to a large extent, we've seen our society hollowed out substantially. You can use regulation, the fear of retribution. There's a reason why Luigi Mangione got so many of them, like, upset enough for Kathy Hochul to have a group call therapy meeting for a bunch of business owners in New York State, you know. But they'll get away with whatever they can. Everything that we have now, everything you enjoy, was built on the working class taking that back from the people on top, you know? The only reason we're not still in like a neo-feudal society, or maybe we're returning to that, I don't know, but you gotta fight for it.
Allowed to replace American workers with guest workers. Finally, this amendment would prevent corporations from treating H-1B guest workers as, for all intent and purposes, indentured servants.
Yay.
Under current law, H-1B guest workers are often locked into lower-paying jobs and can have their visas taken away from them by their corporate bosses if they complain about dangerous, unfair, or illegal working conditions. That is unacceptable, and that has got to change. This amendment would make H-1B visas portable and give guest workers the ability to easily change jobs. Madam President, Mr. Musk and Mr. Ramaswamy and others have argued that we need a highly skilled and well-educated workforce. I agree. But the answer is not to bring in cheap labor from abroad to the H-1B program. The answer is to hire qualified American workers first, and to make certain that we have an education system that produces the kind of workforce that our country needs for the jobs of the future.
It's not a coincidence, of course, that the people who are pushing for H-1B visas the hardest, like Elon and Vic, are in favor of destroying the Department of Education.
Bottom line, it must never be cheaper for a corporation to hire a guest worker from overseas than an American worker at home. And that is what this amendment is all about.
Which is
Madam
good.
President, let's be clear. 30 years ago, the leaders of corporate America, the political establishment in both major parties, and the editorial boards of the most influential papers in our country told us not to worry about the loss of millions of blue-collar manufacturing jobs that would come as a result of unfettered free trade agreements like NAFTA and permanent normal trade relations with China. Don't worry about the loss of those jobs. And the reason they told us not to worry is that that job loss would be more than offset by the many good-paying, white-collar information technology jobs that would be created in the United States. Yes, they said you'll lose blue-collar manufacturing jobs, but not to worry, we will create zillions of good-paying, white-collar information technology jobs. I personally, who was a member of Congress at that time, never believed that, and I helped lead the effort against.
And this ultimately is the crux between like a Marxist perspective on foreign labor and immigration and a reactionary one, which is the reactionary's response to this is, oh, foreigners are stealing our jobs. Whereas the Marxist position should be the wealthiest people in our society are underpaying foreign workers as a way of getting around paying domestic workers a full wage. The agent, the active agent, is the wealthy people making these decisions. And they are not forced to. They choose to. There are plenty of businesses that still operate here in the United States out of principle. Many of them are privately run because as soon as they're made public, their shareholders demand they go cut costs and cut quality. Everything is made worse. Everything gets bought by private equity, the factories get moved overseas, the quality of those products get worse. But who's responsible for that? Chinese sweatshop workers? Mexican automotive workers? God, no. They're not doing it. They're just trying to make ends meet, man. It's the people on top actively making these decisions. And if you think that the profit motive in this respect is so strong that it demands these wealthy and powerful people make life worse for everyone, then maybe there's something wrong with that motive. Maybe, at the very least, it can be reined in with much better regulation. But we've stripped all those regulations. We prioritize nothing but the line going up to the point now where our primary measure for the wealth of a country is its GDP, something which at this point has basically nothing to do with what the country produces internally or what it's capable of producing, and everything to do with speculative investment, venture capital, stock market shenanigan bullshit, you know? Not to say that doesn't represent wealth, but it certainly doesn't represent the kind of wealth that refers to production or people's quality of life. There is a relationship, but it is not always a clean one. The line do go up, though.
NAFTA and PNTR with China. Unfortunately, I and the many others who opposed those trade agreements were proven correct. NAFTA and PNTR cost us millions of good-paying manufacturing jobs as large corporations shut down here in America.
Agreed.
And fled to China, Mexico, and other low-wage countries in search of cheap labor. And what about all of those great high-tech jobs that supposedly were going to be created? Well, that didn't quite happen either. As a result of the H1B guest worker program and other guest worker programs, major corporations are now importing hundreds of thousands of lower-paid guest workers from abroad to fill the white-collar technology jobs that are currently available. In other words, heads, billionaires win, tails, American workers lose. In my view, we can and must change that reality. And a good place to start would be to pass this amendment and put American workers first. Multi-billionaires in big tech should not be allowed to hire guest workers to fill entry-level and mid-level information technology jobs. Those jobs should be going to American workers who have, among other things, the constitutional right to form unions and collectively bargain for better wages, benefits, and working conditions. Madam President, I will be asking for a roll call vote on this amendment, and I hope very much we can get it to the floor. In my view, the time has come for the American people to know which side their senators stand on this issue.
Did this amendment get added? What was the vote on it?
In order to accomplish that goal, I very much appreciated the statement that Majority Leader Thune gave on the floor of the Senate last November about the need for more amendment votes in the Senate. And here is what the Majority Leader said on November 14th with respect to the amendment process. Quote, all members of the Senate, and not just the members of a particular committee, should have a voice in final legislation through amendments on the floor. Members should assume that amendment votes will be the norm. That will mean taking tough votes at times, but that is part of our jobs, end of quote. And I would very much agree with Majority Leader Thune. The truth is that in the past, whether it's been Republican leaders or Democratic leaders, no one debates that the amendment process has been thwarted. And I hope we will see a new opening here where people will be allowed to offer amendments, take tough votes. That's what we were elected to do. Madam President, on that note, I thank you.
Okay, it hasn't been long enough for it to have even been voted on. It's still in, like, the proposition stage. Well, it is what it is. Kind of miss that guy when he's gone. Hopefully no time soon. He still seems pretty healthy. Healthier than Joe Biden, at the very least. Stop saying this. He's just so old. And it's a negative season.